Hello everyone. Welcome to yet another interesting episode of Smartbots powered Botcast. Today we are having an interesting conversation about generative AI and conversational AI. And we have two eminent guests today. Let me introduce you to Will Poole. Will is a tech visionary and a social entrepreneur. He played key roles in companies like Microsoft and is currently co founder and managing partner at Capria Ventures. A warm welcome to you, Will. Maybe you can introduce yourself and we can take it forward from there.
Well, great. Well, thanks for having me here. And I bring a perspective of global South investing and particularly focused on generative AI. That's what we've been doing for about just over a year now. I've been in Global South for about 11 years, and I'm really excited to talk about the implications of Gen AI in Global South.
Great to have you, Will. And I have another eminent guest, Sandilia. Welcome to you, Sandilia. If you can introduce yourself, we can get going.
Sure. Thanks, JP. It's great to be here on the podcast. And I think it's going to be really interesting talking to somebody like Will, who's different from a lot of our other guests who are, very focused on the technology or on very specific aspects of the business. So I think it's going to be fun having a slightly more broader perspective and a discussion around that.
Sure. So the topic for today is why GenAI is a bigger growth catalyst in the global south than in the rest of the world. The forum is open to you guys. You can go ahead and start interacting on this topic.
I'm happy to start with my views on Global South. Obviously, that's where we spend all of our time. And I think there's really three primary drivers to why Gen AI is going to have a disproportionate impact on the global south. And the first one is language. I'm guessing that the two of you speak at least more than one language, if not more than two or three languages. I speak only one language, and so I call myself a hopeless monoglot. But there's many people in the world who also speak only one language that's not English. For me, I have the benefit that my language is, of course, the language of the internet, or most of the internet. But if you speak some dialect of Marathi or some language from the Andes called Quechua, you can't read anything on the internet. That whole world of information is opaque to you. You can't learn from it. You can't interact with it. You can't buy from it. It's all just an opaque nothing. Now, generative AI proves to change that. And it's already enabling nearly perfect simultaneous real time translation between at least 100 different languages. And so the first implication of that is that those who are growing up in this world where they are really deprived of all of that value of the English language internet, that information now becomes available to them. And that becomes part of their world now, where before it was not. And so I think the Gen AI is opening up the internet to those who are not English or let's say another major language speaker, right? Maybe you speak Hindi, but again, you don't speak Hindi, but you do speak some local Indian language, or you speak some Andean language, but not Spanish. Again, that's a place where you can get opened up new realms of learning and possibility that were not there before. So that's number one. Number two is looking at education level. So if you are a well-educated person, Gen AI is a fantastic tool. We all use this, and we love the tool, and we're probably above average educated for the world, given that we're in the tech and investing world. And it's going to lift up our abilities a certain amount, right, from here to here. And the amount that it will lift up our abilities will vary over time as the technologies in the Gen AI get better and better. But if you think about somebody that is lesser well educated, maybe they have only a eighth grade education, well, they get lifted up substantially as well. They may be lifted up two or three times their level of education, whereas for us, it might be only 30 or 50%. So the differential on lift, of uplift based on educational background, I think is substantial. And that means that as a tool, it's going to benefit those that are less educated more than it benefits those that are more educated. There's also some job implications we'll get to in a few minutes on that one. And the third area that I think is going to make Gen AI more impactful in the global south is simply youth. right? So global south has got on the order of 5 billion people, of whom around 25% are under 25 years old. And that group is going to grow up with Gen AI in their pocket. And that means they have a set of tools available to them that are going to become part of their life, part of how they do approach work and everything they do. That those of us that are, in our 30s, 40s, 50s or older will not have grown up with that benefit. For us, we're going to be learning new things about how to use this technology. For them, it's going to become fundamental to the way they approach life. Just like the division, the group that was born digital, my kids, don't remember a time they didn't have a smartphone. Well, now there's a whole generation of people that are going to grow up that don't remember a time they did not have a Gen AI in their pocket. So those are my view and the three reasons why it's disproportionately going to benefit the global South: language, education, and youth.
Thanks for that, Will. And while, I agree with you on the disproportionate impact part, I'd like to unpack this a little bit and see whether the impact is like any new technology, it's both going to be positive and negative. But I think the global south is actually not as well prepared as the West in terms of being able to utilize this technology. And again, with the youth, the problem is of the digital divide. There will be winners and losers in richer economies. The winners and losers, the society can take care of them. The inequalities are already vast in the emerging economies, and they'll only get worse if a technology multiplies them. So on all the 3 points that you made, while they're all correct and it will have a disproportionate impact, whether it will play out positively or negatively is something that I think is a concern.
Those are great points. And I think one question you also have to ask is one of time, right? And so when the first release of OpenAI came out, and people were all laughing about the fact that it hallucinated and had all these bugs, I pointed out to them, hey, how many of you guys use Windows 1.0? Like, oh no, that was not very good software. Like, well, okay, how about Windows 2.0? That wasn't Windows 3. Yeah, they got it right then. Ah, okay. Well, you're looking at ChatGPT kind of 1.0-ish here, right? It may be called version 3.5 internally, but that was their first release to the general public. And you look at how much has changed in just 12 months since then. So, so I think that one has to consider the pace of evolution of technology on all of these points that you made, which are good points as well. So let's take, for example, the fact that many of the large language foundation models are trained predominantly on English. Well, there's now efforts. There's one called Mistral in France. That's a European focused one. I think there's a lot of conversation about building one in India. There's certainly unquestionably a number of them being built. I've seen the chart of them in China based on the Llama structure from Meta. So there's plenty of both regional and national efforts to build language appropriate training that can benefit and bring together a foundation model that has the local language, or at least the majority language there, and not to be overly English biased. But I think your point also is well taken, that there's going to be cultural bias also, right? And even if it's, take your major languages, right, you're still not going to have the nuances of the minor language and the cultures that are not as well represented or represented at all on the internet. So I think that's going to take time for that to evolve. I think that you bring up the digital divide issue, and I guess that one worries me less. I think, and I'm sure you travel in emerging economies as well. The number of people that have access to smartphone is just phenomenal, and the cost of data has come down, to being almost free, and of course much less than in developed countries. I think that the digital divide by the numbers is not. When I was working in tech at Microsoft in Global South back in the 25 years ago, it was a big issue. And now I don't really see it as an issue. I frankly, I think it's evaporating very quickly simply because the costs and the imperative to get it for value, right? It used to be that what you needed to have was a two-wheeler. Well, what you need to have first is a mobile and then a two-wheeler, right? If you want to get around in the emerging economy. So I think digital divide is the one that's evaporating quickly, but the other ones around language and culture will take maybe a bit more time.
We see that the West is moving fast in terms of setting up guidelines and regulations. I don't think there are laws yet, but they are in the process of being made. There was a declaration recently by the US government, and there's something coming out from the EU. I'm not sure the rest of the world is evolved enough in terms of policies to handle this.
That's an interesting question about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for some of these economies, right? So I think if you read the regulations that came out, at least the draft for the EU, of course, it's going to take them a year plus, maybe more, to get it ratified. There's some things in there that are going to chase innovation away from the EU. We're going to see companies that are going to choose not to headquarter and not to try to focus their innovation in the EU based on the heavy-handedness of some of that regulation. If you think about how the developing economies of the world developed so quickly over the past 10, 20 years, a lot of it was simply a lack of regulation in some areas that hurt people, but it also enabled the economies to move fast and for people to standard of living to increase in ways that wouldn't have otherwise. I think regulation is a two-sided sword, and there's some places where it helps, but there are also places where it hurts. So I think that what we'll see is that the global south will follow as the north figures out regulation and probably make some big missteps both ways, the south will get to follow that and learn from that. But you're right, there'll probably be some harm done. There'll be some, whether it's jobs lost, some hate speech incited, other things that will happen because of lack of regulation.
So, one of the things is with new technology, and this worked out very well for the emerging markets with the mobile phone, is they skipped the entire PC era and directly came to the internet and mobile. And it had a huge impact on the local economies in all the emerging countries. They sort of absorbed it, it became part of life. People were comfortable with the technology and it wove itself into the fabric of society there. How do you see that playing out for AI?
I think exactly the same thing is going to play out, and it's one reason why we're so bullish as an investor in this area. I was both a corporate leader and then an investor during the mobile revolution in the global south, and just saw how fast that technology caught on, and it went from literally nowhere to being dominant in a small number of years. And so I think the similar thing is going to happen, that Gen AI powered solutions, and we can talk about what those might be, but they're going to go from not there at all to dominant remarkably quickly, because they don't have to just rip and replace things that are already entrenched, right? So when you start with something that's brand new, that's what happened to phones, right? Mobile did not have to rip and replace landlines. They just started from scratch with mobile. And here you're going to have lack of engagement, lack of language communication, lack of commerce, all kinds of things are just not there in these places that are going to be enabled and will jump into existence very rapidly because of Gen AI. I'm an optimist on that point. I think, and in general, I think we probably underestimate the speed at which that will happen, right? The speed of the mobile, and that's actually one interesting point about Gen AI, is it builds on the speed of everything else, right? So it sits on top of all the innovation in mobile, in cloud, in SaaS architecture, everything else. Gen AI then layers on top of that and gets the benefit of that from a speed perspective.
True. And what are the sectors that you think where it will have the most impact in actually around the world, but especially in the global south?
Well, now you got to decide what word you want to use equate impact to mean, because you can look at positive impact, you can look at negative impact, you can look at commercial impact, you can look at social impact. But let's start with places where we might see it have the most visibility most quickly. They'll have both negative and positive impact, and that's simply in customer service, right? So if you think about the call centers that are being run in the Philippines, in India, in Brazil, they're all three of those countries are very big at call centers. There's many people in those call centers that can be displaced very quickly by a Gen AI. And so there's a place where you're going to have a positive impact on the quality of experience that the customer gets, because they're going to get a AI intermediated, best and capable chatbot, but there's going to be a bunch of jobs to vaporize, overnight. And so that's a place where you have, serious impact on both sides of the coin there. Now, I do think there's an opportunity to have the AI, in that case, become augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence, and help have if you think about a co-pilot for a call center person that can enable them to become much more effective in what they do. Then the AI does the front end things, then the augmented intelligence co-pilot can then make that human even more capable, and help them provide an even better experience. So that will claw back some jobs through that, but there's still going to be lots of jobs lost. The pure commodity stuff is going to go away, and be displaced very quickly by AI. I think another area where I see mostly positive impact is education. I think that the potential for Gen AI to help both teachers be more effective and help students learn better in a more personalized way is tremendous. It's not going to happen overnight. Nothing happens that quickly in education, but we already see some of our companies in the ed tech domain that are helping, again, both sides of that. If you take a teacher's got a lot of mundane things they have to do, if you can take those mundane things off their list and have the AI take care of them for them, the teacher is going to spend more time teaching and doing things they'd love to do. If you have a student who's struggling to keep up and the student has a co-pilot that can help them learn some algebra problems more quickly or help them catch up with other students in the class, where the teacher doesn't have time to pay attention to them because they're in a large classroom, then that student is going to, all of a sudden catch up as opposed to falling behind. So I do think that there's potential for a very positive impact on education, which will happen fairly quickly over the coming years. It's already starting, but it's going to hit scale over, I'd say, 12 to 24 months. We'll start to see scaled Gen AI in education. So those would be two beginning sectors. There's plenty more. Get on the list. We do a lot of investment in fintech. I think the opportunity for Gen AI to help people understand financial services and to help them get better access to financial services is there. I think the ability of AI in general is not just a Gen AI statement in financial domains has been proven for many years, and that's only going to get better as well. I think in the area of healthcare, there's lots of opportunities. There's lots of issues and risks as well, and we could talk about that at length. But there are targeted use of Gen AI in healthcare is already there, and we have one of our portfolio companies doing incredible work on that front. Plenty more to come. What are you seeing from a sectoral perspective? Where are you seeing the fastest uptake? What do you see in terms of sectoral uptake in your travels around the world?
But going back to that topic, right now, the capability to work at a fundamental level in this technology is very concentrated. It's here in where I live in the Bay Area. It's in the US. The ability to train models is actually, and the hardware to be able to do that, the expertise to do that is actually a very narrow set of companies and people. Considering that the hype around the technology and how important it's going to be, obviously we are believers in that, all of us on this call. The power of the technology is concentrated in very few hands. What can you know countries around the world do in order to at least have their own backup for this technology in terms of building skills, capabilities, infrastructure? How do they need to think about it?
That's a really interesting topic, and I'm not sure that there's not a one size fits all answer for countries around the world. First of all, I think that if I could start by saying let's draw one line, which is which countries and countries representing a language group will have the wherewithal to build a foundation model that is language and culturally aligned with that country, and that's not that many, right? And a country the size of India can do it. Certainly, China can do it. Can Pakistan do it if they want to? But it's a trade-off of that versus other government expenses. Can Vietnam do it? If they decide that it's culturally critical to them, yes. But it's a pretty small country, right? And so, do you have the ability to put that kind of money into language training? Can countries smaller than those do it that have local languages that are not going to be prevalent? So I think that's the first question: does there need to be a national push on a foundation model that's language and culture? Now, it could be that they can leverage off of the existing work done by others, right? It's this idea of continuous pre-training can allow you to put new languages maybe on top of existing languages and get the benefit of the models that are built, the heavy lifting that happens down the street from you in the Bay Area, and then just add the local language on top of that. And I can't tell you technically if that's possible or not, but it seems like that may be an area that can help. That's one area, probably the first thing for any given country on terms of seeing that there's local innovation and adaptation of this very Silicon Valley driven technology. I think beyond that, what I look at is simply building the expertise to apply the technology. And that's what we're excited about. And frankly, it's a very approachable tech, right? It doesn't take somebody a long time to get to learn how to use it. It's not that much different than learning how to use a different cloud architecture for a competent developer. And that means that you can get moving quickly. And so I think there again, the countries that have a good IT outsourcing and IT services business are going to do well by having the companies that are leaders in those areas apply GenAI practices so that they can both help domestically and globally to apply this tech to the different solutions at hand. And so I think those are two things that will help drive better utilization and fast utilization of GenAI within a given global South countries.
One more point I just wanted to add to what Will was mentioning in terms of getting the foundation models to the countries like India, China, and few other global South nations. I'm sure the big cloud providers like AWS and Microsoft would definitely have an instance of these large models available in these geographies. Today, I don't think there is any, say, India-based instance of a say Anthropic, Claude, or OpenAI's GPT-3 or GPT-4. The large ones are not there, are not in any of these geographies. All of them are in the US primarily. But I see that in the near future, these big models, I'm not talking about a model which is developed exclusively in India or any of these countries. That is one part. But even these models, the large ones like GPT-4 and Anthropic Claude, will be present in countries like India maybe the next year. And so the compliances around accessing these models, the government, the companies in these countries will have their compliances which will restrict inferring or hitting these models will be addressed by these large cloud providers. I think that is one disruption, I mean, which this will definitely open up access to Gen AI in these countries.
I think you're right, and I think earlier we had the discussion around the guardrails issue and safety, and those being very Western focused right now. So again, you come back to the language and you say, hey, things that are screened out and avoided in major languages, not just English, but let's try the major languages in which people are engaging with the foundation models. Those are not going to be there at all for some dialect or smaller local language, and therefore the AIs can say and do really bad things, right? And so that is going to be a problem that's going to have to be addressed at a local and regional level pretty rapidly as we bring the language in and try to see the proliferation of the tech. I think it's solvable. It's understood how to do it in English. You simply need to do the overlay in those local languages. But it's going to be a continual arms race, if you will, of the good guys against the bad guys who will be attacking and trying to get bad things out of these models. And I'm pretty sure you could probably get any of the major models to say something pretty bad about some given country in that country's local language right now, because who would have taken the time to figure out how to build the guardrails for that, right? They've been focused on how do you not say bad things in English. So I think that's going to be an interesting problem. It's going to be lots of good prep news stories on that topic, I'm sure, in the coming years as the technology proliferates. But it's all solvable, right? I'm a technologist with a long-term perspective on this. There's nothing we're talking about here that's rocket science in any way, shape, or form, right? There's nothing here that's requires some miracle to happen in technology before it's solved. It is a matter of applying the right manpower, knowing what you want to do, and getting it done. And I think that that's entirely possible.
I think the miracle has already happened, and now we are operationalizing most of the things for the rest of the future.
Exactly. The actual miracle is yet to happen, which is not Gen AI, but AGI, right? And when that miracle happens, then life will be different. But we could debate for a long time about whether that's going to happen in 2 years or in 5 years or in 50 years. There's many people that say the Gen AI path will never get there. Other people say it's just a few years away. So that's above my pay grade to answer that one.
No, that's a tough one. And but last year we've spent a lot of time talking to people who are all interested and they want to use the technology, but they're not really sure how to. And I think I've been told so many times that we are at the peak of the hype cycle. What's your view on that in terms of this technology in general?
Well, that's a hard calibration. I've been through a lot of hype cycles, And so whether we're at the peak of this one or not, I don't think so. I think we still have more to go because you can't really come down from the peak until you have some things that are really taking it off the top of the mountain. And there's the problems that have been found have been corrected fast enough. So I think the hype is going to keep generating. And I think particularly as again, we haven't seen that many massively deployed vertical solutions that are built from the ground up on GenAI. And as those businesses start to come into existence, they're being built as we speak, right? But as they come into existence and start to scale, I think that's going to feed the cycle even more because people will figure out that things can be created now that could not be created before. Businesses can be built more profitably and more quickly now than they could be before. And that's going to change views for the positive. So I think that there's going to be more positive contributors to the hype cycle than negative for at least the next year or two, and which is going to cause AI stocks to be overvalued and everything else to be what it is. But that's the way technology works, right? We've all lived through this before.
True. And one of the things that we are seeing, and we obviously are targeting businesses, not businesses in the West, not in the global South. So it's a little bit of a digression. But I would say 80% of the people that we are speaking to want to create some kind of a Gen AI strategy, and that's too broad a term. And then at one level you're talking about data privacy, guardrails, and really technical details. On the other hand, a Gen AI strategy without picking the use cases is too broad, and find that right level of figuring out your path and what to execute has not been easy. And we've been through a lot of conversations like that this year. So, I'd like to get your thoughts on that because everybody's interested. People are actually much more aware of the details in this technology than I've ever seen before. In terms of, people off the street are able to tell you things like, what is retrieval augmented generation or guardrails or some other technical term, literally. Hallucinations, everybody seems to know what they are, right? And considering the amount of awareness, there doesn't seem to be clarity in terms of how to take this to the next step, especially in enterprises. Why do you think that is?
I'd say, first of all, enterprises are notoriously slow to adopt technology, right? I was around for the enterprise adoption of PCs and Windows. I watched cloud. You watch mobile start with consumer before enterprise at scale. And enterprises are just by definition going to be slow, and for a lot of good reasons, right? They've got a lot of data they need to keep secure. They've got a lot of business processes they need to keep running well. And so that caution is going to be there. I think that the initial missteps around data privacy with GenAI have scared a lot of enterprises, and that's going to take some time to undo that. I think that they've done the right things now. So I think that the API guarantees of data security and so on are all in place, and the ability to get private instances and things like that are now there. So the fundamentals to avoid the concerns are in place, but we have a broad view that data privacy is an issue, which it should be that view because, hey, if you think about the internet broadly, what percent of information in the world is available on the public internet, right? And the numbers I've heard, estimate something less than 10%, right? So the people that own the other 90%, that's really important to them. It's proprietary. They don't want it to go to their competitors. They don't want to go to governments. They don't want to go to anybody that's not supposed to go to. And the whole concept of Gen AI being that we're going to go and suck in all this data and help you be more smart and do more intelligent things with your business processes, well, that right away flies in the face of all the concerns on data privacy. So I think that's going to be the first and foremost issue for some time for enterprise adoption. I think the next one is around control. Right. And so one of the reasons why PCs took off in the enterprise in the early days was because they allowed people to wrest control away from the centralized IT guys and the mainframe people. All of a sudden they took it down to the departmental level. Well, if you think about it now, hey, if I want to put the control of my my sales data in my pocket and have it queryable through Gen AI, well, what does my IT guy, my CIO think about that? And should every salesperson have access to all that data? How do they deal with access security? And how do I know that that information is not leaking out to my competitors or to some aspiring journalist or stock analyst? So I think there's a lot of, it's come back down to control and information security, privacy. It's going to be the driving factor for enterprise adoption. And those who get that right are going to make inroads more quickly, but it's still going to take longer than they want simply because of this overarching meta concern that people have.
I think we are getting to the time here. So what is your vision? Where do you think this will go, a few years from now, both from, the technology in general, but also since we started off with the global south, what is the kind of impact that you see taking place in 5 years and 10 years from now?
I think coming back to my initial premise, which is that the technology will disproportionately impact the global south in a positive way net. Again, there'll be some negatives as we discussed, but in a positive way will be net disproportionately better. I do think that speed is going to be remarkably fast. And it's going to be fast because the economics are there. The cost of using the tech is very, very low. And the ability for that tech to produce a better overall experience for a end customer, for a enterprise, for a small business, all of those things are favorable to rapid adoption for all the reasons we've discussed. So I think that what really gets in the way then is just humans, right? And humans take time to do things because we do. And so the speed of adoption of technology is limited less by the technology itself, but by our ability to assimilate it. And you can look in the schoolrooms as a good example, right? So when sometime in February or March, the state of New York came out and said we ban ChatGPT use, period. And the state of California said we embrace it, right? Well, there you had humans who are both from large states in the same country, all pretty well educated, making very different decisions about what to do with the technology. So I think that the ability of humans to make the right decision and to see that the potential is there and to adopt it will happen very quickly. I think everybody is mobile first. GenAI is actually particularly good in a mobile first environment because the voice input. I think the whole breaking down language barriers are going to help make it go more quickly. So I think within the next 3 to 4 years, it'll be surprising to see anything that does not have some GenAI element to it in technology. It would be surprising, meaning that pretty much everything to which GenAI can be applied is going to be applied over the next couple of years. And for one simple reason is that if a company is not applying it and doing that well, their competitors will do so and beat them. And the world is very competitive, and I'm a big believer in the speed of commerce, really driving the right things to happen in the world. And so that the fact that technology can be embraced at a relatively low cost quickly and deliver a high value means it's going to go fast. And those that get left behind are going to be truly left behind, and they're not going to compete, and they're going to become irrelevant. That's really the call to action we've had with all the companies we work with is get on the train now, get out ahead, and learn. And if you don't do that, your competitors are going to race ahead of you. So it's going to happen. Given the rate of technological change, this is going back 20 years, by the way, so this is not yesterday. Given the rate of technological change, even 20 years ago, what's most important is that we teach kids how to learn and to love learning, recognizing that the things that are going to happen in their lifetime will be more profoundly different in terms of change due to technology than everything's happened in the previous 50 years. And so I think if you take that fundamental, you want people to learn, to love to learn and to continuously learn. And then you maybe have some hope of staying ahead of the AIs in some areas. But the next point is one around creativity. And if you think about the discussion in education around STEM versus STEAM, which I'm sure you've heard, basically saying, hey, you know what? There's more to the world than just science and technology. We got to think about arts and music and culture. And we need to have our kids learn that to have a creative thought process in them. We know that people are actually better thinkers if they learn in multiple languages from birth. They actually become more creative and open thinkers. That's proven in brain science. So things that are going to be helping people become more creative, to apply creativity and to love to learn how to apply creativity, I think are going to be fundamental, because the world of just hardcore raw knowledge or raw analytical ability AI is going to be doing that.
A different point of view. The points that you have mentioned, the first 3 points that you have mentioned on diversity of language, the education levels, and then the youth, the average age of population in the global south, has made me think, and I'll definitely take it forward. I'll educate myself more in this perspectives. That's how I'm seeing this conversation. It's really insightful for me personally.
We've not had a broad frame discussion. I was just saying we haven't had such a broad frame discussion in any of our podcasts. We've done 20 of these, and they've been, I think, that in that sense, this has been a really great experience, honestly.
Great. Well, glad to be here and glad to share some perspectives from the global south representing 5 billion people in the fastest growing markets in the world.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Will. You have a good day.